He's built a career on pushing boundaries, but this time he's gone too far for even himself. Today, The Sun said Jeremy Clarkson had asked them to take down his column about Meghan Markle. That didn't stop it this afternoon, becoming the press regulator Ipso's most complained about article in history. I hate her, he said. Not like I hate Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish First Minister, or the serial killer Rose West. But, he said, on a cellular level. He added, at night I am unable to sleep as I lie there, grinding my teeth and dreaming of the day when she's made to parade naked through the streets of every town in Britain while the crowds chant shame and throw lumps of excrement at her. He was drawing from an episode of the Game of Thrones. The actor here played by a body double because her request to do it partly clothed was rejected by producers. The scene itself was criticised for being a violent, misogynistic fantasy.
His actions epitomise how the abuse of and violence against women in Britain has been normalised. It means that if you can have Meghan Markle, a member of one of the oldest and most powerful families in Britain, be dehumanized and abused with impunity, it sends a visceral message to the rest of us women that we are not safe, particularly ethnic minority women.
Clarkson's column came after the last 3 episodes of Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary were released. In it, the Duchess of Sussex said tabloid attacks had led to online death threats.
Meghan just needs to die. Someone needs to kill her. Maybe it should be me. And he's just like, okay. That's like what's actually out in the world because of people creating hate.
This morning, more than 40 MPs from different parties wrote this letter to the editor of The Sun, asking her to retract the article and to sanction Jeremy Clarkson. They say, we're deeply concerned about the role modelling being promoted to young men and boys, that it's okay to use violent language to address a woman you might disagree with. And then this afternoon, John Nicholson from the SNP, who also sits on the Select Committee for Culture, Media and Sport, wrote to ITV and Amazon asking them to take Jeremy Clarkson off screen. Yesterday, he tweeted to say he'd put his foot in it, that his clumsy reference to Game of Thrones had gone down badly and that he was horrified to have caused so much hurt.
To be quite frank, I want to see Jeremy Clarkson come out with an actual apology, not a mealy-mouthed, he understands he's caused hurt. There hasn't been any use of the word sorry. I think there should be an apology from The Sun to Meghan Markle, but also a reassurance that this isn't going to happen again.
When asked if they'd keep Clarkson on as Who Wants to Be a Millionaire host, ITV said, at the moment, we are. His article, they said, didn't represent their values. The Sun newspaper didn't comment as questions around its editorial judgment swirled. They're employing perhaps that old royal adage, never explain.
Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to Emma Dabbery, broadcaster and author of the book Don't Touch My Hair, and to Eleanor Mills, the former editorial director of the Sunday Times. I began by asking Eleanor if Jeremy Clarkson should be sacked.
Well, it wouldn't have been within my role to sack him, but I would not have let that column go into the newspaper. I work for the Sunday Times, I should say, not the Sun, as it was.
And so the fact that it did go into the Sun, what does that say about the paper's attitude to race and to women?
I would hope that it slipped through because maybe somebody wasn't as on it as they should have been, it being the run-up to Christmas. If it was actually passed by the senior executives, I think that's quite worrying because it shows that they really are stoking up a culture war. I find it really shocking that any mainstream broadsheet in the, that any mainstream newspaper in the UK would say it was okay for a woman to be pelted with excrement and for her to have shame shouted at her naked in the street. I don't think that that's okay. So as an editor myself, I would have taken that out. And over the years with Jeremy Clarkson, I have done exactly that. He's filed me columns which I've thought went beyond what was acceptable, and I've taken it out, and I've said to him and explained to him why I was taking it out. And in fact, we used to see it as our job to save him from himself.
Right. Emma Dabbery, should Jeremy Clarkson be sacked?
Yes, I think he should be. But it seems that when he is sacked, he just moves from one plum position to another. And I think the fact that he's historically essentially gotten away with so many kind of similar moments to this one, I think that demonstrates as well that, we talk about cancel culture, and I think cancel culture does exist, but I think it's people who are relatively powerless who tend to come a cropper via cancel culture.
Eleanor Mills, Jeremy Clarkson has a loyal fan base. He has lots of people who read his column and watch his shows. Would any organisation be loath to let go of him as a result?
Well, here today, I saw quite a lot of reports about whether ITV will keep him on doing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, whether Amazon might think twice about the Grand Tour and his Clarkson's Farm. I would have thought that they might come under quite a lot of pressure from advertisers.
Well, they've just said they're keeping him on. So what does that say about the broadcaster's attitude and the industry's attitude towards him? Or is it just simply that he pulls in a lot of viewers?
Well, he's got, nearly 8 million Twitter followers. He has a very loyal following. I mean, Amazon, to a large extent, built a lot of their streaming on buying him in on Top Gear. So maybe the calculation is that he brings in more people than he alienates. I hope, though, that this is a watershed moment, certainly for the print media, thinking about what is acceptable and what isn't. And I think the fact that Clarkson himself has asked The Sun to take the column down, I think that has to count for something.
Emma Dabiri, do you think this is a watershed moment?
Sadly, I don't think it's a watershed moment. This disproportionate rage and vitriol that we are often met with, where our behavior, if it was somebody of another identity group that did something, it would be perhaps praised or unremarked upon, or maybe there'd be kind of a slap on the wrist. But when it's a woman of African descent, there's often this disproportionate rage that we witness. And, that dynamic is something that I have experienced my whole life, kind of excessive punishment in comparison to your peers, very, very different treatment to your peers, from school to interpersonal relationships, to professional settings, to public spaces.
Eleanor Mills, has this column and the reaction to it and the fact that ITV, for example, are standing by him, has that actually reinforced Meghan's point that there is institutional racism within the British media?
Yes, I think absolutely. I think in that way, it's a massive own goal for Clarkson and for The Sun, because all it does is completely reinforce exactly what Harry and Meghan have been saying, that the British tabloids are racist, that it's full of misogyny. And as chair of Women in Journalism, we brought out a big piece of research which looked at representation within the British media. And we did it just after the death of George Floyd. Less than 1% of editors within the press are black or BAME. And even in the 2 weeks after George Floyd's death, there wasn't a single article written on the front page of a British newspaper by a black journalist.
Jeremy Clarkson said that everyone who's my age thinks the same way. Is the reaction to Meghan, the documentary, and the consumption of British media dividing along generational lines?
No, I think that's really rude to older people. I mean, I run a website now called Noon, which is all about gendered ageism and is about queenagers and women in midlife. And my community is absolutely horrified by what Clarkson said.
Emma?
And yeah, I'd like to say, I don't want this to be, obviously this is an extreme example, but I think certainly why it provoked the response that it did from me is because I found it so recognizable in terms of being treated differently in this society than white men are, certainly, but also often than the ways in which white women are. And this is much bigger than just what the treatment of Meghan Markle, but it's actually about the pressure that is put upon marginal people from minoritized identities.
Emma Dabiri, Eleanor Mills, thank you both very much for joining us.